Perfect New World is almost here, and I was lucky enough to be invited to the closed test. And as a long-time player of the old game, Perfect World International, or PWI, I was comparing the two at every step. If, like myself, you've been looking forward to a remake, I have some good news for you. I've enjoyed my time playing in the closed test, and that's a very good sign for the future. I played PWI for a few years and had several characters at endgame. On PNW, I've reached level 41 and the highest level player is 45 at the time of recording, or the end of the closed test. One thing to make clear before I delve into the game content is that this closed test is unfinished, and therefore things I mention in each topic may well change before the full release. Available to play in the test were the Mythic Berserker, Elven Galeblade, and two human classes, Mystic Sword and Dragon Spear. The classes available in the test all seem to be damage dealers, your typical melee DPS in most ways, besides the class Mystic Sword, which has a few more mid-range attacks than the others. There won't be any spoilers in this summary, so it's safe to listen on even if you'd like to play through the story yourself. Let's start with the narrative. It's an interesting story that's quite complex from the start and introduces multiple characters early on. I have to be honest, it wasn't thrilling, and in its current state it's the kind of story you might be interested to hear once, and you'll probably skip as much as you can when you create more characters. I'm a bit disappointed with the additions of mechs to the world. It isn't really fitting for the fantasy genre or the original game, but I guess it may be popular with players from other MMOs. The story is very much a solo questline, which I would count as a negative as I enjoy the team play aspects most. But if you're an enjoyer of solo gameplay, this could be a positive. The storyline is somewhat equivalent to spiritual cultivation in Perfect World. The places that you go and how you progress in the story is tied into other aspects of your character progress. The idea of a spirit culty level seems to be gone, however. Character creation is well made. The realism of the graphics makes it a much better experience creating a character than in the old game. You have lots of control on the facial features and structure, but the choices for some things seem to be lacking. For those who love to have more freedom to design their own character, there were certainly too few choices for hairstyles and colours, but hopefully more options are on the way. As mentioned earlier, all the classes available in the test were seemingly damage dealers, although they do possess differing skill sets, strengths and weaknesses. Each class has a unique weapon so far, and a unique power-up system to go with it. We had one class in the Mythic race, which is the new name for the Untamed. The class was called Berserker, and their weapon was a very large sword. The movement of the Berserker is quite slow, and their attacks are quite slow too, but they are heavy hitting. We also had one Elven class, the Galeblade, which has two small swords or daggers, and is very much the opposite of the Berserker, in that Galeblades are very quick to move around, can dodge easily, and their attacks mostly have quick animations. Then we had two human classes, Dragon Spear, who most closely resembles the Blade Master from PWI, and Mystic Sword, who has some similarities with the Seeker. The Dragon Spear and Berserker felt more tanky than the other options, but are certainly not true tank classes. Mystic Sword and Galeblade seem to be very good damage dealers, but much less survivable than the other two. The fact that there are only damage dealers available so far is a bit worrying, and I have to say that having other roles in the finished game is make or break for Perfect New World. Without magic classes and tanks, we'll be missing so many important elements of team play that made PWI enjoyable. Let's all hope that there are plenty more classes to be added yet. There are some hints at that. For example, you'll see plenty of female mythic NPCs who look just like PWI's Venomancer. I'd expect we'll see a minimum of 6 classes on release, meaning we've got 2 more classes to come, but I'd like to see more than just 2 magic classes, healers or tanks be added. As we already have 4 melee damage dealers, I'd prefer to see 9 classes on launch. Let's start with what's new. There's a new dodge system. You can run around to dodge attacks as well as being able to dash quickly forwards, sideways or backwards. Unlike in PWI, you do need to dodge. You'll find even solo mini-bosses can be dangerous if you don't dodge the majority of their attacks. This new dynamic attack system applies for you attacking monsters too, so they do have hitboxes and you do need to be aiming at the monster you want to hit, unless you're using an AoE skill. This is a complete replacement of the old percentage-based hit and miss system that used your evasion and accuracy stats to determine whether or not attacks hit. It's an expected change that was definitely needed to bring the game into the modern world. This new freedom of movement introduces more of a skill to the game, and that can only be a good thing in my opinion. You want to feel that there are plenty of ways you can improve as a player, as well as improve your character. Something to note is that there was only one test server in North America, and I've been playing from Europe. That latency was certainly noticeable at times when it comes to dodging, so it's important that there are regional servers available on launch. There are now combos even for your standard left click attack, meaning that when you get 5 hits in a row you'll deal more damage. There are of course skill combos too, although I found it is tough to remember them. I believe that's in part due to the fact that characters leveled up very fast in the test, so I didn't have as much time as I would like to get used to my existing skill set before I unlock new skills. Bosses are far more interesting to fight than in PWI. There are different mechanics for each boss, including the new shield breaking and unique skill sets. There were of course some more interesting bosses in PWI, such as some of those in FC, but now it feels that every boss is fun to fight and there's some learning to do each time you come up against something completely new. I'm pretty happy with the look and feel of playing each class so far. The one issue I've had with the Dragon Spear and Berserker is that slight feeling of clunkiness because of the slower animations. It feels that you get stuck in an attack animation more easily and end up accidentally taking some hits. Leveling up the skills for each class works a lot like it did in later versions of PWI. Exactly as you'd expect, you have a menu from which you can spend earned resources to improve your skills. Something new that I think is a very important addition is that the skill animations are now shown in the menu, which helps a lot in distinguishing the skills. One area I'd like to see a lot of improvement in, however, is in the description of the effects of each skill. It was hard to understand the effects of many of them, and I feel that's in part due to the translation from Chinese. Passive skills and buffs seem to be altogether gone so far, although they are somewhat replaced by the new talent system. As you level up, you'll unlock new parts of the talent tree, and you'll get bonuses and unlock new skills through that. The world is huge, and there's clearly a lot to explore. The visuals are impressive, and there is a variety of different looks for different areas that matches, if not exceeds, the old game. The downside to this beautiful open world is simply that it's not so open. You can only enter new areas as your level meets the requirements or as the story takes you there. For me, that's a real downside. I know it sounds weird, but I feel that if I want to walk into level 60 mobs at the start of the game and risk immediate death, that should be my choice. So it's a bit disappointing to downgrade from a true open world, as was found in PWI, to this somewhat limited one. There is one upside though, the excitement of reaching a new area is a really good feeling. My complaint about the not so open world leads nicely into my next point about flights, or boosters as they're now known. Unfortunately you can't fly anywhere. In fact, every time you venture into a new area, you'll have to be walking or riding a mount that's firmly on the ground, or close to it if you're riding a floating mecha turtle. It's a shame because it's another feature that I loved in PWI that hasn't carried over. But I can see a clear gameplay reason. The devs don't want you flying and getting an overview of the next instanced area, or even dropping right in the middle of it when you're meant to enter through the main gates and clear it. On the whole, not a lot else has changed when it comes to transport. Mountain flights maintain the look and feel that they had before. The only noticeable change is that you can't fly up with spacebar. It's now fully mouse controlled, and yet I still try pressing space every single time I start flying. Pets, however, have changed. They have gained use, and that's picking up your loot. Yes, finally you don't have to spam click, or whichever key you had pickup bound to. It's a nice quality of life change that I've certainly appreciated while playing the test. For the social system, I'll start with the friends list, and there is only one interesting change worth mentioning. That's an affinity that you can build with those you have added. I assume that the more you play with someone, the more you increase it. As you increase your affinity level with someone, when you team up, you get a bonus, like a boost to your crit chance. Other than that, everything about the friends system is just as it was before. Teams also seem to be a straight copy of how they functioned in PWI. They were known as squads. There's nothing new to report on there. Guilds, however, do seem to have some new features, and the guild base is a pretty large map with its own monsters to fight, contribution-based quests to complete, and so on. It seems like it's a sort of improved version of what we had in PWI post-2010. I have a feeling that being in a guild is going to provide you with more rewards early on though, so it's probably worth finding a guild once you hit the level 20 requirement. There's an important distinction to make before getting into the details of dungeons. In PNW, we have instance areas of the map that act sort of like dungeons and are occasionally included in the story. Then we have what I consider your usual dungeon, like you would get for your FBs in PWI, an instance away from the main world. The instance map areas usually have monsters and unique bosses, as well as sometimes having simple puzzles to solve on the way to the boss fight. When you come across them for the first time, you seem to have to clear them solo, but once you've completed them, you can rerun them with the team. There were 2 proper dungeons that I got to try in the test: Lost Temple, designed for level 20 and above, and Skycrest Mine, which was for 35 and above. Both dungeons have a solo mode and team mode. This works a lot like the choice at the start of Twilight Temple in PWI. These dungeons were relatively simple to clear in solo mode, but in team mode each had a few extra mechanics to think about. At several points in Lost Temple Team you'd need to pass electrical charge from one point to another, and even from player to player sometimes. In Skycrest Mine there were a few moments where you had to use minecarts to travel around, and through other actions open up new doorways and send minecarts onto different tracks. I enjoyed those aspects of both dungeons, but have to say the boss fight in Skycrest Mine relied too heavily on explosive rocks and firing minecarts into the boss, meaning there wasn't that much actual fighting involved in beating it. I'm hopeful that they'll find a better balance for that by the time of release. One last point to make is that in the test the maximum team size was 4. I'm hoping that that is only temporary to match the 4 classes, so I'd assume that we'd get team sizes of 6 to match the 6 classes minimum I'm expecting. Stats and gear. Character stats work quite differently in Perfect New World to what we're all used to. You still have 4 stats, but you no longer assign any points. Those points increase by a set amount as you level up. Besides that incremental increase through leveling, you'll often get small stat bonuses on your gear. The 4 stats are currently named STR, DX, CON, and INT. I have a feeling that these might be renamed by the time of the release, as in some places in the game those names have differed. The purpose should remain the same though, with the stat points improving attack, defense, and health. As mentioned in the intro, there are 7 gear slots in the inventory. One is of course your weapon, which is different for each class, such as a spear for Dragon Spear, sword for Mystic Sword, and so on. Strangely though, there isn't any armor. I assume this decision was made for cosmetic reasons, because they want to encourage players to wear their fashion, or skins as they're now known. I'm not a fan of this decision at all. To me, getting cool new armor as you leveled up in PWI was a big motivator, and the gear that you saw on other players set your expectations for the future. If you saw somebody high level pass by, that was a glimpse of what was to come, and that really pushed me to keep progressing. I think it's a real shame to lose something like that. Now everyone sort of blends in. I personally am not a fan of having modern fashion in a fantasy game, but I unfortunately imagine that's what we'll be seeing much of the time in PNW. So what's in place of armour? It's entirely items that you would have called accessories in PWI. You can have a necklace, a belt, 2 rings, a badge, and a relic. Each gear piece usually grants you stats like increased health, magic defense, and physical defense based on the gear level, and then you get some random added bonuses which can add to your base stats. The way you can improve these gear pieces uses 2 very similar systems to PWI. The first is enhancing, which is almost identical to the refining in the previous game. You use immortal stones that have a chance of increasing the enhancement level of each piece. You can improve your chances of success with an item that looks like a Tienkang stone, now known as Sky Steel, and you can guarantee success with dragon orbs. Each enhancement level boosts the base stats provided by that piece. The second is imbuing soul stones. Soulstones function in exactly the same way as they did in PWI, including the ability to combine gemstones to make higher level ones. There is, however, one new system, Weapon Awakening, which works alongside enhancement to provide both a stat bonus and a visual upgrade to your weapon, in exchange for a set of unique items that you are able to collect or purchase with in-game coin. On the whole, I like the consistency in gear improvement, and it meant keeping my gear up to date felt pretty intuitive as a PWI player. Spirit Beasts are in essence another collectible gear piece. In the test there were 3 elements, fire, thunder and water. For each of those elements you could have 1 Spirit Beast equipped, and each of those provides stat bonuses. Besides the basic stat bonuses, if you complete a set of the same beast, you get extra set bonuses added on top. Once you have a Spirit Beast equipped, you unlock a unique power-up attack that's also used to break a certain type of shield that bosses use. Spirit Beasts don't quite have an equivalent in PWI, but if I had to pick something, I'd say the War Avatar cards that were added later in the game are most similar. In my playthrough of the test, I didn't come across any sort of open world PvP, but I did give 3 instance PvP areas a try. The first is the arena, where you can fight solo or duo battles, both to practice and in a ranked mode. My personal experience of this mode wasn't great in solo. With the dodge mechanics, it felt like a lot of the fight consisted of trying to run around at the edge of each other's range until someone got hit, and then from there it felt pretty one-sided. Whoever was stunned or hit up in the air usually lost. There is of course a long way to go in terms of learning classes, including learning the classes myself, and then there's potential changes to the game itself, so this could be totally different by the time of release. The next instance was the Battle Royale mode, which definitely has potential. It very much feels like the Nation Wars that were added with the Earthguard race back in PWI. I can see it being a fun mode to compete in. And finally there was a mixed PvE and PvP treasure hunt event, which I wasn't so impressed with. It felt like there wasn't much incentive to actually fight the monsters, even though they did drop good rewards, until you fought off all the surrounding players, which leads to not much treasure hunting and a lot of time standing around watching other people nearby. The PvP fights themselves felt somewhat balanced, with Dragon Spear clearly being the front runner in the arena during the test. There is however a bit of a counter game involved. For example, Berserkers seem to be quite good against Dragon Spears, but struggle to keep up with the speed of a Gale Blade. I haven't read into this too much yet, as the addition of real casters and tanks could totally change the way a lot of these modes play out. Overall, there are good signs, but I'm not totally convinced of the PvP side of the game just yet. I'm hoping for the option of open world PvP to be available in a future test, as well as large scale guild versus guild battles akin to territory wars. Is Perfect New World going to be pay to win? PWI players will know that Perfect New World is going to be pay to win to some degree, but just how much is going to be a very important factor in whether or not the game can convince players of other MMOs to make the switch. A lot has changed since the height of PWI's player base more than 10 years ago, and having a game totally dominated by those who can throw money at it won't cut it anymore. So just how pay to win will Perfect New World be? Unfortunately, that's a question that can't truly be answered until launch day, but there are encouraging signs. What I've gathered so far is that there are the same range of cosmetics available that are highly likely going to be available for the new paid currency diamonds. Besides that, I've only noticed the battle pass having a clear advantage for those who are happy to pay. Of course, this is by no means a guarantee of what we'll see in the full release, but we can hope. I'll be back with more reviews and Perfect New World content as we get closer to the release, so subscribe to keep updated. Thanks for listening.